Hello. What's up, guys? Node Investor here. Hope everyone is doing well. I hope you all had some time away from the charts this weekend, some time away from Twitter and from the end of the world, coronavirus, all the stuff. Maybe you were spending all your time at Costco stocking up supplies. You never know. You just never know. Better prepared than not, right? But we're going to look at the charts today. I'm looking at the potential bounce starting to happen here. Now, keep in mind, this is very short term. We're going to be talking mostly just what to look for, what to expect here in the next couple of days, what I'm looking for, what I'm thinking. And then after that, it's just going to take some time, right? The daily chart is going to take some time to do some work. After what we saw last week, the significant pullback, it's just a little bit too soon to say that was the low. Could this be the low? It could be. Are we seeing a low form? I believe so. So here's how I'm going to be playing it. I'll be going over that. And then, of course, some names that I'm watching. What are the big cap names, the small cap names that are going to be on my radar this week, and how I will be approaching the markets after what we saw last week. I'm thinking, just thinking out loud here, I'm thinking the pullback that I've expected to finally play out here a couple weeks back is starting to see the later innings. I'm hoping. I was looking for about 2 weeks of pullback. We pretty much have seen that now. We saw some pretty good climactic action, not just in the crypto space, but in the broader market as well. And so at least a bounce, right? At least a bounce right now. So that's what I'm looking for. And then, we'll just kind of share some thoughts on the broader space, the big picture view, and we'll go from there. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter than normal. So it may be a quicker stream if I don't get to all of the names that you guys request. I apologize. We'll do later streams throughout the week, of course. So we'll get to it. So welcome. We've got some few folks coming in. Alexander, Melissa in the house, the Investinator. Nice. Thank you for being here. Eric, Daniel, share some thoughts. Why aren't we seeing more pop due to more likely? Yeah, the move to safety. So the whole move to safety scenario, the digital gold. As I mentioned, like during the 08 financial crisis, everybody thought, oh, gold's going to pop and we're going to see this flight to safety. And it came down along with everything else. And that just would not surprise me to be the case with crypto as well. But it bounced back faster and actually went on a significant rally after that. And so did silver. And I think crypto would do the same in near term, especially if the broader global economy goes into a financial crisis or a recession even. It'll impact currencies, and crypto is basically in that space, right? It's kind of an alternative currency. And so that's how I think it'll play out. But when there's the scare, the panic, the initial move is generally just defense, and people flight to cash and raise capital, and especially something like Bitcoin, if it's been up since from 6,400 to 10K, people are going to book some gains on that, especially the big funds. I mean, they're not going to lose their year on a pullback. They're going to book some gains. That's just the way they play it. But it just depends on your time frame. If you're thinking longer term, then again, as I mentioned, this is probably a good opportunity. But if you're thinking short term, then yeah, you want to kind of batten down the hatches type of thing. So, but without further ado, let's get to it, my friends. So looking at Bitcoin first, I'm going to cover Bitcoin and then I'll jump into some of the broader charts here. We'll look at the coin market cap, the BTC dominance, and then we'll pop over to the Node Insider site. You can see here the Bitcoin trading strategy went flat yesterday, my evening yesterday, and so it was short. The daily strategy is still staying short. I'm thinking it'll probably close out here soon, but it's been short for a while and it's finally gone flat. I saw the 4 hour go flat here, and I would agree. We're seeing a little bit of bounce action here. So if we zoom in, things I want to point out here, this is the 4 hour view of Bitcoin. You can see that the RSI has started to climb here a little bit. Now we're approaching the 60 mark, which, near term, that's kind of a wall typically. If you've taken the RSI video course, the bull and the bear zone, if we're still going to be in the bear zone, much above 60 is going to be tough, right? So I'm expecting some pause action. But in the near term, yes, there's been some support that was tested above that 8,400 and it held. So here's the, the exact 8,400 line there, but you can see on a closing basis on the 4 hour chart, it held even above 8,500. And so you saw some wicks, some shakeouts over the weekend, but this little zone has started to develop as support. And I'm thinking any pullbacks into, the high 85s, 8,600 should be looked at as potential secondary entries and opportunities. But on the way up, what I'm looking for are two levels. The first one is this most recent swing high. That's going to be the level to be watching. That's also the daily 10 EMA. So the daily 10 EMA, excuse me, not that one. The daily 10 EMA sits here, just below 9K. That's the first kind of line in the sand there. And then the daily 22 EMA, by the time price catches up, will be close to about 9,200. And so this little zone here is kind of the first target to be watching on the way up. But I don't want it to see just kind of go straight up. In fact, it'd be much stronger if it bounced about to the daily 10 EMA, pulled back, held above 8,600, and then bounced, and then at that point you could see a stronger push. And so in the near term, just some near-term, short-term targets here. Potential quick scalp opportunities is what I'm looking for on the way up. Oops, keep pushing the arrows there. And that's really it. On the big picture, if it just really starts to rally, then the first big wall is going to be up here near that 9,500 level. That was that big support level, that descending triangle that finally gave way. And of course, you saw a pretty quick move below that. And so on the way up, anything into that range is going to look like that's going to be the first resistance, especially on the daily chart. The daily chart's going to take some work. 4-hour, 1-hour chart, it's having a nice little push here. I think any dips are viable above 8,600, 8,550. But on the daily chart, I'm not necessarily looking for a V bottom and just like, here we go, we found the low and it's just straight back up to 10.5. There'll be some backfilling along the way. Ideally, there'll be some sideways action on the daily time frame. It may be a little choppy for a week or two, but then if it starts to hold, you start looking at that as, hey, that's potentially the right shoulder forming on that big inverse head and shoulder pattern that we're looking at. And so that's positive all around. We've seen a pretty good pullback. Alternatively, on the bear case, right, you could just see an oversold bounce right up to 9K or 9,200 and then just start to roll over, and then we make a new relative low. And the level on the downside is basically the same as what I said last week. I don't want to see it get much below 8,200. If it dips back down, 8,200 is going to be where I want to see some strong support coming in here in the big picture, right? I want to see it hold much below that. So that's what I'm looking for in the near term on Bitcoin. There's been some trend break. You can see this little downtrend that was broken. It finally cracked above it after a little quick shakeouts. And so seeing some good action here in the near term. My bias right now as I head into the new week is long. I'm looking for long trades, not necessarily short trades anymore. Certainly was short for basically the last week and a half off and on. And so now I'm changing that and either going to be flat or looking for some reversal to the upside and looking for those opportunities on the upside. And mostly from a shorter term time frame, just going to kind of be looking at the scalp trades, not necessarily the long term or the swing trades at this point just yet, because there's not any confirmation on the higher time frames that that was the low. I think once there's confirmation, we start to look back and say higher highs, higher lows, or big volume coming in. Then at that point, yeah, time to get much more aggressive for the long end. But for now, I'm gonna still play it cautiously, but I'm looking for some upside action, seeing some positive action here in the near term, looking for some potential continuation on that. If you go to the 1-hour charts, the RSI is starting to get up there. Maybe we get to that 9,000 and then pull back. But like I said, any pullbacks, let me zoom in on that for us. Any pullbacks here, I think are positive potential pullback entries, as long as they kind of hold above this 85-50 range. Don't want to see it much below that. Much below that, then it starts to look like we're going to test the lows again. So just got to play it a little tight right now, but all in all, not too shabby here. If we go to the daily chart and just kind of take a big picture view, we've seen this decent pullback. I mean, it's been a substantial pullback. The broader market as well has pulled back. You're down about 20%. That's not bad, 20%. And of course, the total crypto market cap saw almost the same there. But let me take some of these off here. But if you look at the bigger picture, right, we're still trending lower. The moving averages are still above price right now. The 10 EMA is up here near 9K. 22 is above about 92.60. And so there's some work to do, right? That's what I mean is, you've bounced, you've seen the RSI come all the way back down, but this is a low developing right now, no doubt about that. But is it the low? And that it's too soon to tell. Time will tell. But I'm thinking, this bigger picture inverse head and shoulder may begin to play out. And look at how the last shoulder formed, right? It was choppy for weeks, almost a month. And so it took its time, right, before it finally developed. And you could see something here. Now, I expect this one, because the depth of it is going to be a little bit more shallow, I expect that it's not going to just go sideways and choppy for a month. I think if people start to get the hint, the notion that maybe that's it, maybe that's the pullback, and this right shoulder is forming, then I think you'll start to see the upside start to develop much sooner, right? Instead of this kind of going sideways for 5 or 6 weeks. I'm thinking it'll be a little bit shorter than that, but it could still be choppy here in the near term, meaning the next week or two, as this digests, right, this downside action. Because what you want to see typically happen is price drops. Obviously, the moving averages are inverted. You're going to get that first rally. It's going to test support and the resistance, and then some backfilling. And if it starts to go sideways, then eventually those moving averages will flatten out, and then they'll go back up to normal, right, where they're bullishly correlated. Kind of like you saw back here, right? You saw this price action just kind of go sideways, moving averages really flattened out, and then they positively correlated along with volume as things started to break out, and then it was an uptrend, right? And so that's what you expect to see here. Now, big picture, I'm still leaning in favor of this big breakout here that could be developing. And so what I'm going to be looking for is between now and kind of into May, basically looking for that right shoulder to form and then that breakout to take place, which would project up to around 14K if that happens. So that's what I'm looking for in the big picture. In the near term, still going to play it a little bit cautiously, kind of just scalping, but I'm thinking we see some bounce action this week. So with that in mind, let's go look at the broader market here, looking at that BTC dominance, seeing it kind of starting to flatten out here. And so what that means to me is I expect the altcoins, especially the bigger cap names, start to outperform if Bitcoin starts to bounce here. So we saw a pretty good support zone here. We saw that drop to 62% is what I was looking for. Let me go to the daily chart. I was thinking we'd see a bounce if Bitcoin pulled back. We saw that. And so we're kind of in that zone now where, it could go a little bit higher, but I'm thinking if Bitcoin finds a near-term low, we'll see this start to pull back again, at least retest that 62%. And so what that means is you're going to get some upside action on the alt BTC pairs, especially some of the bigger cap names. At least that's what I'm looking for here. We'll see if that actually plays out. Looking at the total market cap dominance, bouncing a little bit off of that $230 billion mark. 235 was the exact number there. Seeing a little bit of support, but this again looks very much like the Bitcoin chart. It follows it closely because Bitcoin is 60+% of this chart, so it's going to follow the general trend very similarly. But seeing some pullback action here and trying to get a bounce, but still below the daily 10 EMA and below the 22 EMA. So just keep that in mind. Big picture, still nowhere near being confirmed. Just seeing a little bit of a bounce right now. That's all we're getting. So looking at the Node Insider site here, the combined bull momentum index market value, which looks at short-term time frame and long-term time frame at the same time, is reading caution. Keep in mind that's basically a neutral stance, but it's coming off of weak, and so we're getting the bounce, and you got to look at it from a relative perspective. So kind of going from red to yellow, not as bullish as it's when it's going from green to yellow and then bouncing back up. So just got to keep that in mind. The bot strategy on the 4-hour is flat as of yesterday. The daily is still showing short. No surprise there, considering the broader trend is still very much downward. Looking at the trending names here, a lot of small cap, dare I say, crap coin names on the list. V Systems, Einsteinium, Redcoin, Burst, Doc.com token. No disrespect if this is your favorite coin, but I'm just saying they kind of fall in that category, right? We all know that. But there's some good names on there. Link, Keeper Network has been on a tremendous rally here recently. It's been on this trending list pretty much all of last week. Was just kind of one of those persistent names bucking the trend overall. Matic showing up on here, but not a lot of names, right? It's a pretty small list compared to what we've seen here in the last several weeks. So not a big list, and certainly not showing any depth in the market, right? There's no top tier names here per se, other than like maybe Chainlink, but there's a few in here. Other than that, not a lot of depth. But if we go to the bot status, and I've got it filtered already based on the BMI rating for the altcoins. Now keep in mind, this is the altcoin versus Bitcoin pair. And this is just looking at the bigger cap names, right? That's what I've got on the list right now. Top of the list right now is Link. Link is the only one showing green. This is the only one that the trading bot status has as long at the moment. There's a few names that are kind of showing this cautionary stance. But look at the daily chart. Trading bot's still relatively bearish on most of these names. Short, flat on the shorter time frames here. So what are the names on this list that I'm looking at here? Link is certainly on the top of the list here. Got to keep an eye on that. We talked about this one last week. It was one of the ones showing the most relative strength, bucking the trend, and just has continued to outperform in the near term. So looking at that one here. BATS is another one that's on my list here. Tezos, ETH are two other ones that we're going to look at that I think are probably my top picks for the week. And let's see what else is on the list here. Now Tezos is showing weak, but it's flat on both the daily and the 4-hour strategy. And so I'm going to go over that here shortly. But there's a lot of, still a lot of red, a lot of weakness on the board. Another one here, ETH showing red, but it's flat on both time frames. What else here? That's probably it. Now going to the alerts here. Some pocket pivots is what I like to look for in this type of market environment. After we've seen the big pullback, after we've seen, the scare, the bearishness, all the big sentiment, I start looking for these pocket pivots, these power pivots as I call them, and they tend to signify some potential turning points after the big pullback. They also point out some breakout levels when prices start breaking out, but I like to see them on the pullbacks, and you can see there's a few names here showing up. EOS, so I'm going to put that one on the list here. Bitcoin Cash on the move, that's USD, so that's because of Bitcoin, the price action there, but we'll look at that one here. Let me see what else. Let me take off the on the moves here and just shows the pocket pivots for the last day or so. So we saw EOS. There was a USD pair. I'm going to skip the USD pairs for now just because I'm looking at those names that are going to outperform the Bitcoin side. HBAR pocket pivot. Let's go look at that guy. Icon. Let's go look at that guy, see if it makes any sense there. And some small cap names here. You've got Nano still showing up there 3 hours ago. BATS, Mana pocket pivot. Let's go take a look at Mana, Decentraland, Atom pocket pivot. So I'm going to pick out a few of those names as far as watch list candidates there. And I'm looking at just the BTC pairs for now, and then we'll go from there. So let's get to it. So I'm going to deep dive into this as quickly as I can and try to keep the stream to about 40 minutes, give or take. So looking at Bitcoin again, expecting some more bounce action. Things look positive. Let's start with some of the big cap names here. And if we have some time, I'll kind of go through some of those names that you guys are asking for. But for now, I'll try to keep this quick. So looking at Link first. Link has been one of the ports in the storm here as of late. We saw that pullback, very nice bounce, and so far bouncing, still making a lower high on this 4-hour chart. So keep that in mind. But it bounced right off support. Very positive to see that. Generally, the first names up, the first names out of the gate are the ones that tend to continue throughout the move if that's it, right? If the move continues to the upside. So that's what I'm looking for. I think any pullbacks to these moving average pairs on the 4-hour chart certainly are worth looking at. So that's what I'm going to be doing on names like Link. It depends on which angle you're coming in from, if you're coming in from the USD or the BTC pair. But if I'm coming in from the BTC pair, I'm going to be looking at this, or if it takes out this most recent 4-hour candle to the upside. But keep in mind, you're right at some near-term resistance here on the upside. So I always hate to buy like right at resistance, because it's either wait for it to break out and then pull back, or look for a dip and then kind of catch it as it goes into resistance. So that's what I'm looking for there. But any pullbacks look ideal. Of course, there is now a swing low established here over the last day. Got to keep that in mind. You've had a very nice rally. Let me zoom out here, right? This was a almost perfect throwback entry on that daily chart, right? You had this big pattern that was playing out, and then you had the breakout, and then during the sell-off last week, Link BTC pulled back almost perfectly to that breakout point and then just bounced right off the line. And you can see here a little bit of a pullback the last 2 days, starting to move higher here. So that's why I'm liking Link. It's definitely one of the stronger names in the big cap space here right now. Probably the top of the list right now. So definitely one to watch if the market continues to outperform to the upside. I think Link will continue to do some good things. Looking at Link USD, let me go Link Tether here. Again, right at some near-term resistance, but it was pulling back. You can say that was a little bit of a bull flag on that daily chart after the bounce. You had this decent pullback. Now it's starting to rally here. Let me look at this real quick. I'm wondering if that pullback lined up with any key ratios here. There's about a 50%, pullback on that fib ratio, but not bad. I mean, that's considering this pullback. So on the way up here, if it continues to go up, and I expect it will if Bitcoin bounces higher, then over 435, then your next target is basically the mid $4 range, the most recent highs. So 460 to 480 is what I'd be looking for as your next big upside target. So that's the level to be watching there. I wonder how I don't do this often on the streams here, but let's do an extension view here real quick. So if I do a fib level up to that point there, let's bring that right back down here. And so your first target on the extension is the 272 and then the 141, and that lines up almost perfectly with that little range there. So that'd be kind of your first target on the way up. Then after that, near $5, about 495. So Link USD looks positive all around. I definitely would be keeping an eye on that name there. Looking at Tezos, XTZ, of course, has been in pullback mode after a very strong rally. But the question is that the end of the pullback? Are we done? Is it ready to start doing its thing? Let me go to the daily chart here on Tezos. And again, this just kind of shows it was hitting new all-time highs. And this is the XTZ Bitcoin pair, right? And look at the pullback. Relatively mild compared to some of these other names. I mean, it still held the moving average pair right here. So definitely got to keep an eye on it. Showed some good relative strength. It needed to pull back. After this move, everything was going climactic. It was never going to come down ever again. People were calling for $10 XTZ, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we got the pullback. It's kind of reset. Hopefully you guys didn't load your bags near the highs, but now you got the pullback. Now the question is this the end of the bounce or the pullback, or are we going to get another leg down? I'm thinking definitely keep an eye on this one here. If you zoom in on that 4-hour chart, very strong rally here off the lows on the 4-hour over the weekend. Kind of pausing, pulling back, so far trying to set a higher low. I'm keeping an eye on it here. Definitely look at this swing low as the line in the sand now, but if it starts to take out this range, it could see another quick leg up, and then at that point I'm looking for a retest of these most recent highs, and so that's what I'm going to be looking for. But I'm not expecting it to go straight there. In fact, with all of these alt names, I'm going to be looking at Bitcoin as the kind of the determining factor, right? If the altcoin is outperforming and then all of a sudden Bitcoin hits those resistance levels I'm looking for and starts to pause and pull back, then I'll be booking some of the gains on the alts, not necessarily waiting for them to hit my targets. So that's how I'm going to be playing it. I'm going to be looking at Bitcoin as kind of my indicator there. But all in all, XTZ looking interesting here. Now looking at it from the USD side, it had a very good pullback. Again, I was looking for that pullback. We finally saw it. If you cut it on the short side, congrats. That was a great short. Down about 20-30% or so from the highs, about 35%. So it was a nice little bounce, and has now been kind of chopping around sideways here over the last couple of days, over the weekend. Let me move this box out of the way here. But we can see I wouldn't call it a double bottom, but you're seeing some support starting to form, a little bit of a high, but there's a very clear resistance level here around that 290 mark, just above, call it 295. But getting above that, things really start to look positive. And then I'm looking for about the low threes, maybe 330, maybe 350. I'd be surprised if it got that high on the first bounce. But from here on up, that's a pretty decent percentage move. So if I looked at it here, for example, and I scaled out going into 330, that's about a 20% move here. And that would not be unreasonable for a name like XTZ. So that's what I'm looking for as a potential trade to the upside. How do you trade that, right? You always, me at least, I look at the risk reward ratio. If the stop loss is too wide, or if my entry is too high, then I either wait for a pullback or I let it go. I got to get at least a 2-to-1, and in this scenario, right, that get me just about there, a 2-to-1 with a entry here at 280 and looking at about 330 is the upside. That puts you right around 2-to-1 with a stop at yesterday, or I guess this morning's swing low, which is 254. So if you keep a tighter stop, obviously that improves the ratios much more, but you also got to think about how reasonable is that stop. Is it too tight? Am I going to get wicked out? So it's a trade-off, because a tighter stop means a bigger position, of course, but there's the risk of trade-off. So, but that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm going to be looking for on the XTZ side. It's probably, other than Link, probably my top pick for the week right now. I like it because you can do other things with it as well, like margin trading and that sort of thing. So, a 15 to 20% move on something like that really starts to add up. So something I'm watching here. Definitely, of course, everybody has different strategy, different style. I'm not saying go out and buy XTZ or anything, but definitely something that's on my radar right now, top of the list, especially considering the pullback we've had. It had that reset, it needed it. But keep in mind the daily chart. Let me take these lines off here. Like everything else, the daily chart, with a few exceptions, but like everything else, the price points are still trending below these moving averages. There's no confirmation just yet. You're getting some early signs that, hey, yeah, maybe this is putting in a good low, but there's no confirmation yet, right? You could stall out here above $3 and then just roll over, make a new low. So there's certainly nothing yet in the rearview mirror that says that's it, the low is in. But considering all things, considering the pullback and all that good stuff, this is a better place to look at it than it was, here near $4, right? I'd rather look at it here in the upper twos than $4 2 weeks ago, after it already had that monster move and everybody was talking about how it was going to $10 next. So just, that's just the way I'm thinking. Let's see, your chain link set to make a move to $6. Yeah, $6 is reasonable for the link there. XRP. Yeah, XRP's, it was on my list here. I'll go over that here shortly, but fundamentally has some challenges just because of the, Ripple Labs holds so much and there's more noise about them opening, $1 billion worth of XRP in escrow. And of course, what they do with that is they sell it to fund Ripple Labs. So that's, that it has headwinds there. Near term, though, it's a great tradable name. I like to trade it. But, long-term hold, probably not my cup of tea. But I do like XRP. I will admit, I actually like XRP for what it's supposed to be used for, and that's for, transactions, because it's basically instant. And so why would I transfer BTC from an exchange to a wallet or vice versa when I can just go XRP and get it instantly and not have to wait for the block count and all that good stuff. So I definitely use it, but I don't ever hold it. It's usually just kind of I'm in it for a few minutes or an hour, and then I'm done and then move on to what I actually want. So, but it has a purpose. All right. So that's, so if you're just joining, we've covered BTC here at the start. I kind of gave my big picture view thoughts there, but I'm looking at some of these altcoin names because I'm thinking if Bitcoin starts to bounce, some of these alts are going to outperform Bitcoin on the way up. So that's what I'm looking for. Top of the list right now, Tezos and Link are my two. Let's go to the next one that's in the runner-up category, and that's ETH BTC here. Again, very much like XTZ, the pullback relative to Bitcoin was somewhat mild. Didn't even break the moving averages here on the daily chart. Of course, price is getting very narrow, very constricted here, so this is kind of like decision time. It could just as easily have a big red day tomorrow and that's it, right? So of course, I'm not saying that that's the low, but considering what we've seen, the pullback, good relative strength here, held up relatively well versus Bitcoin, and it's not that far away from making, taking out these most recent highs and making new relative highs. So definitely on my radar here for an outperformance name. It's been pulling back here. Again, this is the short-term view on the ETH BTC pair. Found some support, much higher support here, and there's a little bit of resistance to keep an eye on here, but so far looks like it wants to get going. If you look at it from the USD pair, ETH USD, I'll go to Coinbase on this one here. Very good stuff here. Now I was looking for a symmetrical triangle setup here over the weekend. I thought, this is a bear pennant, it's going to break lower, but it had that quick bounce back, so certainly negated that that bearish pennant setup. And now what I'm looking at is you've got a break of the downtrend here. That's positive once it started to clear that after having that little shakeout that retested support around that 214, 212 mark and quick bounce back. So looking at that, but again, 1 hour chart is starting to get up there on the RSI, but I'm thinking any pullbacks, just like the Bitcoin pair just like the BTC chart that we looked at, any pullbacks into that, near term moving averages, especially on the 4 hour, would be looked at as potential secondary entries. On the ETH USD side, I don't want to see it get much below, call it 218, 215, right? Ideally, if you get a pullback here, it'd hold the moving averages on the 1 hour chart, but if not, I want to see this trend line hold right over here. So, any pullbacks into that, call it 220, 218. I want to see it bounce after that. So first target on the way up, 238, 240, and then above that, you're looking at 250 as your kind of your big picture resistance level. So that's the bigger picture target on the ETH side of things. I'm thinking we get that, especially if Bitcoin bounces into 9K, 9,200. Would not surprise me to see something like that play out, but it's not going to go straight up there. If you go to the 4-hour charts, again, the moving averages are just now starting to curl higher, so we'll see. Getting over that 235 is going to be your first kind of hurdle there on the line on the sand, but so far, not too shabby there. So let's go to EOS. EOS was one of those names that had that power pivot. Let's go look at that bad boy there. EOS, again, had a pretty decent sell-off versus Bitcoin. If you look at the EOS BTC daily chart, which is what I'm showing now, after that big breakout that we saw in mid-January, very nice rally, and then, of course, very quick pullback, and just has been making lower highs and lower lows. Just every rally has been lower and lower, but finally seeing some support. You had two big wicks show up here just above that 3,800 Satoshi level, but the moving averages are still trending lower. So far, price has continued to see resistance at the daily 10 EMA, but you get this another retest on very strong volume. Gonna watch it for a potential bounce, but right now, there's no confirmation, right? You're kind of just getting this bounce right now. You could even say, hey, this looks a little bit of a bear flaggish if you were on the bear side, and I wouldn't argue with that. That certainly would be valid, but getting much above this starts to invalidate that. And then, of course, if you take out this 4,400 level, things look much more positive on the daily charts. Whoops. And then at that point, I'd be looking for kind of a resumption of the trend, especially considering this most recent pullback just really brought it back down to the breakout point from back here, the January breakout point. And that's what you were looking for, especially on the daily and the weekly charts. You had that big breakout, strong rally, and it's coming right back and testing it. So considering that, that's actually a positive thing because you've got a very strong support just below. You don't got to give it much room to the downside. So EOS, definitely one to watch. I'm not so sure it's going to top of my list just yet. I want to see some more cards come out of the deck, if you will, but definitely on my radar. Let's go to the H bar. Also showed a power pivot here. That's hash graph. Looking a little bit better there. Found some support, kind of going sideways. And that power pivot here was a few candles ago as it starts to clear some resistance here around that 430 mark. And so definitely one to watch. This one has kind of been in play here recently. And so I'd be looking at a potential bounce trade to maybe that 500 sat level, maybe 550 as your first target. So that's what I'm looking for here in the near term. How big of a move is that? You know, you're talking 10 to 20%. So not too shabby, right? Not too shabby for a bounce trade. After that, who knows? We'll see. Just depends on how the price action looks after this 550. So H bar, not too shabby here. You got a very clear support level set up, so you don't got to give it much room to the downside. For me, it'd be 400 sats. I wouldn't let it go below that if I was on this, because below that then just invalidates this support. So that'd be my level to be watching on H bar. Let's see here. Going to what was next on the list? ICX. Looking at the icon. The only reason it hit the list is because we're looking at the power pivot names. Some of these names showed up on the power pivot list. So icon BTC here, daily chart. It's a tough one. I mean, it had that really big move, and the pullback hasn't been that bad. I didn't give up the whole move, but actually it's not too bad. I mean, it's almost a perfect retrace to the 6188. It so far has held on that pullback. So that's it. I mean, you've got a very clear support. Definitely, I wouldn't personally give it much below 3150. Much below that, and it's kind of invalidates that move. So if you zoom in here, that's your support on the way down. It is looking positive though. You get this little rally starting to go sideways here, and now it's testing this near-term resistance right at 3650. So looks like it wants to push higher. And on these, right, if it pushes higher, then I look at some kind of fib levels on the way up. So maybe that guy there, the 382 on the way up as your target. So not too shabby. Definitely worth keeping an eye on here. Some of the smaller ones here. Let's go to BAT, BTC. Looking at BAT, very similar looking price action there. You get that higher low A little bit of a resistance right at 220, call it 2600. But it looks positive here, so I definitely would be keeping an eye on this one. Also had a power pivot here recently, trying to set up. I wouldn't surprise me to see some of these names have that quick spike up. After that, just kind of depends on how they look. What's a BAT look like on the USD side? BAT Tether, not on Trex, probably not enough. Let's go here. Here we go. So BAT, a little bit of a double bottom type action, but just like ETH and some of these other names, breaking that very near-term downtrend on the 4-hour view, getting back above some of these moving averages, all positive there, and just kind of bouncing into the first hurdle here. This is it, 22.9, 23 cents. Getting above that, then BAT looks pretty positive there. I'd be looking for about 25 and then maybe 27 on the way up there on the USD pair. Mana, Decentraland. Is it done going down here? Maybe. My target on Mana, let's go to the USD side. My target on Mana was about the upper threes after that break from the downside. And so far it's holding. Look at that. Not too shabby there. Holding that horizontal price support so far. So this is what I was looking for. When it was up here kind of double topping, I thought if it breaks below 5 cents, it's going to be a quick move to the mid upper threes, which would basically be a retest of this prior breakout. And that played out almost perfectly. So a nice little pullback there, and now you get the test here. You got a little bit of a, I guess you could call it a little double bottom, right? You got a retest of that support, started to push higher, so I wouldn't be against looking at this one. This one's looking pretty interesting. Now on the way up, your first target is now that prior support that broke down. That's going to now be your resistance on the way up. So if you're looking at bounce targets, there's two ways that I would do this. The double bottom bounce target's probably too small considering how shallow this was, so I would probably look at that. The 5 cent level is the first bounce target, but if you did an extension on the double bottom, then you can say maybe 485, right? So not a monster move, but if you like it, it's a quick 12 to maybe 20% on the way up. Good. KNC was on the move all week. I mean, all last week it was on the trending list here. Let me go to a different exchange. And it's finally seeing a pullback. But man, this guy just broke out, continued to rally all week, bucking the trend, and then over the weekend just had what to me feels like the climactic push, right? Everybody was watching it. Finally just, whoa, there goes KNC. And then that kind of feels like the end of the move, a little double toppy here. But on the daily, or the 4-hour, still holding this moving average, and you probably don't want to see it get much below that here in the near term. But yeah, nice little pullback there. If you go to the daily chart, again, it got extended. The daily 10 EMA is still down here near 6,900 and then 5,960. So it could pull back to that level and still be just fine. But look at the volume, right? The climactic volume here near the highs, typically signs of some distribution. So at this point, I don't know. That's a tougher call now that it's played out. I mean, it was on the radar all last week. I would have probably liked it much better here than now after the pullback started. In my opinion, there's probably better names that are setting up right now. This one needs to digest a little bit. Nano. So Nano had a power pivot. Let me go to the 4-hour view. Similar price action on so many names, right? This is versus BTC. A little bit of a bounce. Found a low here over the weekend. A little bit of a higher low. And now it's starting to buck the trend here a little bit and try to get going versus Bitcoin. So that's Nano, microcap name here. Let's do Atom, Cosmos. Atom. I've been waiting for Atom to play catch up for a while, and it just doesn't seem to want to do it. The daily chart just continues to underperform. It's been a laggard for most of 2020, considering some of the other names that we've seen here. This one just continues to lag, and that's after it had a very strong fourth quarter last year. This one's kind of just lagging, but is it done? Is it ready to go? Let me look at some levels here. It's almost at the 618 here on the pullback level. It basically retraced all the way to this prior support zone. So that's probably the most you want to see it go down. So that's, if you like it here, this would be a place to keep an eye on it. And very similar price action, right? You're breaking this downtrend, getting above moving averages. You had a little bit of a double bottom test over the weekend. So yeah, wouldn't be too bad here, but I would personally play this one a little bit tight. I wouldn't give it below basically this weekend's low, because this name has just proven to be making lower lows and lower highs, and until that changes, you got to be cautious. But this is how I'd be looking at this guy here. not much below the weekend low. First target being around 4,700 or so on the way up. And let's see here. Last on my list was BCH, and then I'll start looking at the comments, see if we get any other names on there, and then I'll kind of rehash some of the names. We're hitting the 40-minute mark, and I promised you guys I'd keep it a relatively short, so gonna have to wrap this one up soon. But BCH was on the power pivot list. Looks pretty good here. It is seeing some volume coming in off that low. Very clear support level around that 305 mark, 300 if you want to call it even. And first target on the way up, it's going to be about 370, 360, and then above that 400. So could be a good one. About 10% there. Is it going to outperform Bitcoin, right? That's the question for me all the time. And let me go look at Bitcoin here. Looking pretty good. Power pivot on the BTC pair as well. On the move right now, clearing some resistance. So I like it. I like it here. 0.04 would be my next target. So could outperform Bitcoin by about 6-7% on the way up. And then after that, you're looking at next targets up. So BCH here. Let me look at the comments here. See what else you guys got going on. What's cooking? So I'm starting from the top here. We looked at Link, BQX here. Let's look at BQX. I know that came up last week on the radar when we were looking at the trending names. Let me see. Covered Mana, covered Link, OMG and Neo. Haven't looked at those. Let's go take a look at some of those there. Neo, OMG. And as I said, guys, I'm going to try to wrap it up relatively quickly, so I probably won't be able to get to all the names today, okay? Let's look at Ren, just because Ren is on the trending list here. And that's probably it. So let's see here. Going back to the list. Good stuff. Do I want to look at some of these names? Probably not. Just Ren. Just Ren. Ren Bitcoin here. So looking at Ren. Nice. Nice. Good consolidation here on the daily. Let's zoom out on this guy here. Finding a little bit of a low here. Again, wide and loose name, small cap. So those daily candles can be big percentage wise. But yeah, we'll see. Breaking over that 700 sat level. You probably got a pretty quick push to 800, and then after that, over 1,000. So wow, could be a good setup here. It's been basing out for a long time. I mean, if you zoom out here, right, just kind of sideways, but it is finding a little bit of a low near term. Seeing some good build up here, a little bit of momentum kicking in, kind of consolidating here near below resistance. So yeah, it's a good breakout candidate to be watching. I certainly wouldn't be against it. And again, it's been on the trending list here. I've noticed last week he was on the trending list. Back on it here right now. So good candidate to be watching. I'll put it on the list for the small cap names. Probably the top small cap name that I've seen so far. Other than Mana, maybe, just because Mana came right back to support that I was looking at. Neo BTC here. Looking at the Neo. Neo's been tough lately. Just looks like it wants to get going, and then it doesn't, and then it looks like it wants. It's just been a tough one here. Had a pretty good little move here before the market sold off. Came right back, just gave it all back up. Right now, I don't like the way this move looks. I mean, unless it gets back above these moving averages, this looks like a bounce. It's going to make a lower high. I'd look for at least a retest of the lows, maybe a double bottom or a higher low. And then if it can do that, then get going, right? Otherwise, I'm going to wait on Neo until it can do one of these, like get back over that moving average and then make a higher low. OMG, very similar to some of these other names. Again, just had the big sell-off over the weekend, started to form a little bit of support zone, and for all of these names, that's really it. I mean, that's the line in the sand here, and you can take some shots right above support, which is usually not a bad idea, but you don't want to give it much below that, because that's where near-term support has been found, and if that fails, then these guys are taking another leg down. Odds favor that's what'll happen. So, these are good kind of dip buy entries if you're looking for some reversal trades, but you don't want to give them a lot of wiggle room to the downside, because if it takes that level out, for me, it's usually best to just be flat until things look leveled out again before I take much too aggressive shots. But just to recap here, kind of my list here. Obviously, Bitcoin is looking like it wants to bounce. definitely worth keeping an eye on. Bitcoin here near term, I'm thinking the daily 10 EMA and then the 22 are your next targets. So, 89.50 to around 9,200. If this bounce continues, any pullbacks in the near term that are above 85.50 look like good pullback entries to me. Below that, then I don't like the way it looks anymore. And if it breaks below 8,500, typically not too positive there. But near term, just looking for some bounce. Daily chart, it's going to need some work, right? It's going to need some backfilling here, at least for a few days, a week or so. But this could be a low being established. But again, way too early to say that that's it, the pullback's done. Not a bad place to look at it, for sure. But we haven't seen any confirmation just yet that that's the low. We're done, off to the races. We'll get that eventually, but we're not quite there yet. The other names, of course, Link, showing some of the most relative strength as of late. I think if BTC continues to go up, look for Link to continue to outperform. Had that perfect pullback entry here last week, rallied, gave you another pullback over the weekend, right to the 10 EMA on the daily. Started to bounce right off that right now, so definitely worth looking at. Tezos BTC held pretty good on the Bitcoin pair, came right back to a key level on the USD side. Hasn't confirmed yet on the Bitcoin side, but if it starts to take out that 3,300 level, could get going pretty quickly there. So definitely one worth watching. And along the same camp here, Ethereum, looking at that, very similar price action. This one's much closer to the recent highs, so it's not going to take a lot to break right through that resistance and make new relative highs. Has had plenty of time to pause and pull back. The RSI has totally reset here, so definitely one that I'm watching there. A few runner-up names. We looked at EOS, maybe. It's showing some action here on the shorter time frames here. H-bar as well, maybe a good bounce trade candidate to be watching there. I'll pass on Icon. And then on the small cap names, I'm going to go with Ren as a breakout candidate and Mana as a reversal candidate here on the bounce, because it came right back to the support on the USD side. And so that's it here. There's a few others. Bats, not too bad. We didn't look at BQX here. BQX was one we were watching here. Look at that. Came right back to that pullback zone. We looked at this one on the last live stream. Where I have it circled here, I said it's been holding these moving averages. If you like it, that's a good pullback entry. And over the last week or so, has bucked the trend a little bit. So that's good. But these wicks here near the highs make me nervous. So I'd be watching for a potential double top in and around there. So just be cautious with that guy. All right. I think that's it for now, my friends. Let me go look at the stock market here real quick. I'm thinking the same for the stocks. A little bit of bounce action here. We're getting it, so that's good. Seeing some good bounce trades in Apple, playing out nicely there. It was choppy in the morning. We had a little bit of a gap up and just choppy sideways action, but look at that. The trend is starting to finally play out, so that's nice. Looking at the bigger cap market, right, just overall, there's the S&P 500, very similar price action. You look at the Qs there, pretty much the same here, but how high does it go? After last week, it needs a bounce. It was tremendous, the selling, the insanity, and then Friday saw huge volume on the reversal, so that typically means we'd see some more upside follow through. We're getting that, but then I'm thinking we're going to get some testing once we hit these moving averages and potential pullbacks at that point. So, I don't know if we're out of the woods just yet, but near term, getting some bounce action. Longer term, who knows? That could have been the top big picture view, and we're going to head into a bear market. It's very possible. So I'm certainly not gonna YOLO into the whole market here. Gold, I think it's going to come down further personally, so we'll see. All right. Well, that's going to be it for today, guys. Thanks for the comments here. Thanks for being here as always. We'll see how the week plays out. I will likely do some more market updates. If not tomorrow, then by Wednesday, and then we'll go from there. So if I didn't get to all the names, I apologize. As I mentioned, I wanted to keep this one a little bit shorter, and even then, we're already at an hour. We're at 50 minutes. It's went a little bit longer than I wanted, but thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one.